آمنت بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر والقدر خيره وشره من الله والبعث بعد الموت لا إله إلا الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace, mercy and blessings of God Almighty be with you. My dear friends, welcome once again to the teachings of Islam. I'm your host, Khalil Cave. I've been away for a little while, traveling, as well as I was out with some illness, which would prevent me from speaking properly in the show. So thank you once again for tuning in to this show. And many of our friends have been asking what's going on, what's happening. We haven't seen you for a few days or for a few weeks on the show. What's happening? So I'm happy to tell you that I'm back, and we are here to offer you the same information about Islam and continue sharing our knowledge as Muslims with you. My dear friends, since I was away, I've been asked a lot of questions, and this one show would not be sufficient to cover the topics that you would need to get information on. So we'll try our best today to deal with some of the questions that were asked. So a lot of people out there have very interesting questions about Islam, especially because of all the things that are happening around the world. Recently, we even had a scare within the BVI. People are asking even more questions now. What Islam is all about. Some people have been asking for Qur'ans, wanting to see, what the contents of the Qur'an really are, and what it is that is causing Muslims to behave so radical and so violent, etc. So we've been really busy dealing with a lot of these issues, a lot of these questions, and we're happy. We're actually happy that as these events unfold, people are coming in and asking questions of me, asking questions about Islam, trying to find out, what Islam is all about, trying to get to the crux of of the matter. So within all difficult situations, within all adversity, there are lessons, that we can learn as human beings. And, just recently I was talking to one of my, friends and advising him about patience. And I was saying to him that, in all adversity, we have to be patient. We have to try to extract the lesson that God Almighty is trying to teach us in that adversity. So, for example, you look at your own eyes, you have some problem with your own eyes, and you are thinking, well, why me, oh God Almighty, why am I going through this? And then you are able to overcome that problem with your eyes successfully. What have you learned? Of all important lessons that may have been taught to you by God Almighty, you have to, or you must have reflected, or you should have reflected on the importance of your eyes. You should be able now to share your experience with someone else who may be taking his or her eyesight for granted. So even in adversity, even in a time of difficulty, you can reflect, you can look into that situation and learn something. So we as Muslims, we are happy that people are coming in and asking these questions, because out of whatever negativity is out there about us as Muslims and Islam, we now are taking this opportunity to educate you, to show you the true colors of Islam, and that Islam is not about what is being portrayed in the media by some ignorant persons that are that are claiming to be Muslims, etc., or by the media itself, who may not have the right information behind what's happening. So one of the most interesting questions that someone asked me recently, I'll share this with you, is why is Islam so scared of reform? Or why does it seem like Islam and Muslims are scared of change and of making Islam more modern and modernizing Islam and making it more liberal. So, it was something that I think it was very, very important for me to share with you also, because a lot of people have this concern that, Islam is somewhat old-timeish and backward. And how do you expect people to live in this modern day and age with a sort of a outdated way of life? Something that in their minds belongs to the Camel Age. So, I want to share this with you today, that many of you viewers, you're Christians. And you're quite familiar with the song, because I've heard you singing. I've passed by many churches and I've heard the members singing this song, over and over. Give me that old-time religion. This is a song that is quite common in churches. Give me that old-time religion. And we need to reflect on this very song that many of us actually sing in church. We want that old-time religion. Now, why would you ask for that old-time religion? What's the need to have, an old-time religion? Something that goes way back in history. Not only with Jesus, not only with Moses, but even before that. Because this old-time religion that you're asking for, it couldn't be just within that time of Jesus Christ or Moses. It had to be before that, because what was good for mankind in the time of Jesus and in the time of Moses, on whom be peace, had to have also been good for the people that existed before that. God Almighty wouldn't give a way of life or a teaching that is only good for the followers of Christ or the followers of Moses. Because all human beings have the same challenges, have the same needs, and have the same difficulties in life. So this old-time religion is not only the religion or the practice that was found in the time of Christ or the time of Moses. The old-time religion goes way back to the beginning of creation, when God Almighty created this earth and He placed the inhabitants on it. There had to have been a code of conduct, a way of life, a religion, so to say, which all human beings should live according to. So for us as Muslims, this is the meaning of that old-time religion that you're asking for. That way of life that God Almighty prescribed for mankind from the beginning of time on this earth, from the beginning of creation. That code of conduct, that module according to which every human being should live his or her life, this is the old-time religion that you're asking for. So many of us, we want this old-time religion, but are you really prepared to live this old-time religion? Are you prepared to embrace this old-time religion? This is a very important question that each and every one of us should ask ourselves. At least we are saying it, at least we are asking for it, but are we prepared to live this way? Are we prepared to embrace this old-time religion and make it the way of living for ourselves and our families, and call others towards it? Are we prepared for this? The Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, has mentioned in one of his prophetic sayings, he says, Bada al-Islamu ghariban, that submission, total submission and obedience unto God Almighty began as something very strange. In every civilization, it was looked at as something very strange, something very abnormal. And he goes on to say, وَسَيَعُودُ غَرِيبًا كَمَا بَدَأَ. And in the end, it will go back to that state that it came in. In other words, there will come a time when it will look very strange amongst people again. It will look like, the most backward and the most outdated thing. The Prophet Muhammad peace says, فَطُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَى. That glad tidings unto those who will remain the ghuraba, those who will hold on to this old way of life, this strange way of life that will look very uncommon amongst people. In other words, my dear friends, we are in that day and age when living the way how Jesus, on whom be peace, lived, how Moses lived, how Abraham lived, how all the righteous prophets lived. Living this way is definitely the uncommon thing. Living this way is definitely treated as outdated. It is like the strangest thing in society. Get up in any gathering. You get up in any gathering and try to tell people not to fornicate, not to consume alcohol, not to do this, not to do that. See how everyone will look at you. Everyone would stare you down, thinking that you're weird, you're backward. What's wrong with you? This is because we're in that day and age whereby this old-time religion, this natural way of living, the way the prophets lived, it is surrounded by so much of evil and negativity, so much of the devil's influence, that the truth now is looking like, the strangest thing. It is looking like the most backward way of life. Because evil is so prevalent. I've been in many gatherings whereby, certain conversations came up about homosexuality, for example, and same-sex marriage, for example. And people, out of 10 persons, when one person stood up and said, I'm not in agreement of this way of life, of this, of such a behavior pattern or such acts, I don't agree with this. I think it's unholy. It's, it is against the commands of God. People, majority of the people stood up and said, this was, this statement is very backward. We are living in the modern age. We are living in a time when you have to become more tolerant. You have to become more open. You have to embrace, every aspect of the modern day. So, from this, I took the opportunity to reflect on this very song that people sing in church today, and I even took the opportunity to reflect also on the saying of Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, that the people now who will stand up against any ungodly practice or behavior, they'll be outnumbered. They will be treated as strangers. They'll be treated as backward. Now, as the Prophet, on whom be peace, said, Tuba lil-ghuraba, glad tidings. In other words, good news. Give good news to those who will remain the strangers, those who will be treated as backwards, those who will be treated as the odd folks in society. Be be blessed with good news that they are on the right track. We have so many other examples that we can use today. Look what is dominating the food industry today. There was a time when folks used to eat very healthily. They used to eat, the basics in life. You used to eat a lot of greens. You used to eat a lot of ground provision. You wouldn't overeat because your parents would tell you, eat little and live long. They would make sure you drink enough water. You didn't have access to all the sodas and all the candies, etc., etc. Now, that old way of eating, which is also part of the old-time religion, going back to that old way of eating, we can find a more healthy lifestyle. We find that the people of that day and age who ate, a lot of vegetables and fruits and drank water and didn't eat candies and fast foods, etc., etc., they lived much longer and they lived a healthy life. Then we have this day and age. We have this whole transformation. We had this whole this birth of a new era in eating habits. Where in every single home now you can find KFC, you can find McDonald's, you can find a whole lot of junk foods. And what is it doing to our children? It's making them obese. Cancer is so prevalent in society. People are having issues with their blood pressure, with diabetes, and a host of other issues people are having. Why? Because they have moved away from that old way of eating. They have moved away from that conventional and traditional way of life. So now you're faced with a host of issues. You are faced with a lot of problems. Look, let us take a look at dressing. When I was much younger, and those of us that are much older than me, you can also think about what I'm saying and say if it's true or not. When you were much younger, how would the women dress? How would men dress? How would they behave in society? If someone dressed in that day and age in a very very loose manner, that person would be looked at as the backward one. That person was looked at as the outcast or as the odd person in society. Isn't it? If, let us say, 70 years ago, someone had walked out on the road with some swimwear in Tortola, people would have looked at that person as, as shameless, as someone who doesn't have any proper upbringing. Now today, in this day and age, it's so prevalent. That's the in thing. That is the in thing. Everybody wants to, to admire the style of living. Everybody wants to look at it as, this is the way of life. A man back in that day and age, he would not drop his trousers below his waist, whereby his underwear is showing, his boxers are showing. He wouldn't do these things. If someone did that, he'd be looked at in a negative manner. Because that old-time way of religion, or that old way of living, that was very strong. It had a very strong influence in people. It was ingrained in the minds and the hearts of people that this is the correct way to live. But in today's day and age, if you were to dress in a proper way, you are looked at as backward. You are not in style. You're not in things. But are these things, are they doing any good to our young folks out there? This new way of life, this new wave of fashion that is taking over the lives of so many of our young people, is it doing any good for them morally? Is it helping them to be better human beings? So what is the solution? What is the solution for such problems? Going back to the old way of doing things. Going back to that old time religion, that way which the people of righteousness practiced. We're not saying that we should go back and start riding, camels and horses and donkeys instead of having a car or flying in a plane. No. But those things that are impacting negatively on our lives, let us reflect that there was a time when these things were not there. And people were much happier. They led lives that were filled with good values. So, let us bring that old time way of life. Let us bring back those old values. You had a time when neighbors would be so friendly to each other. Your neighbors were so kind and loving. They would not cook or prepare a meal without sending a little bit in a bowl next door for the neighbor to taste. We don't have those things today. Many people are not even cooking at home. So how can you share a meal with your neighbor that you haven't prepared? What is so special about sharing some fast food with your neighbor? Because your neighbor is probably buying fast food from the same place. What is so special in sitting down at a restaurant and eating a meal all by yourself? When back in the days, people used to build such strong bonds. They would visit their neighbors. They would exchange visits. They would have their kids play together. People were much closer. They had more love for each other. In the good old days, when people were practicing the old time religion, the old ways that were there, that were left behind by the righteous, people in those days, if there was a dispute between two youngsters, for example, families would meet, they would sit, they would talk about it. Whoever was wrong, they would apologize to the next family. Look at the modern day way of dealing with problems. Two youngsters have some dispute. The first thing that is done is whichever one has his crew or his gang, they just look for this guy, they mash him up, or they kill him, or he drives by and shoots him. This is the modern way of dealing with things. Is it doing any good for our society? Of course not. So in order for us as a people to succeed in this life and in the life hereafter, in order for us to change the way things are, the way things are going, in order for us to pull things back and correct the wrongs that are taking place in society, we have to go back to the old way and the old ways of dealing with things. We have to go back to the old time religion. My dear friends, for this very reason, I want to say to you that as Muslims, we consider this beautiful way of life, al-Islam, as the old-time religion, as the old way of living. For this very reason, I want to share with you whatever knowledge I have of Islam, so that you can see for yourself that this is the closest you will come to understanding the old-time religion. This is exactly what Islam offers. May God Almighty place within your hearts that yearning and that desire to learn more about Islam, not from the media, not from people who are doing negative things, but come out to the mosque, let us sit down, let's have a chat, let us learn about this old-time religion, let us learn about what Islam has to offer us to make us better people. May God Almighty continue to bless you and I with life, with good health, and may He continue to make us prosperous human beings, and may He help us to see the truth as it is. Until next week, God willing, have a blessed rest of your week. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Thank you for tuning in to the teachings of Islam once again.
ورسوله واليوم الآخر